The garage smelled like oil, rubber and old metal, the kind of place where sounds echoed longer than they should. Tools clanged somewhere in the back. An air compressor hissed, then went quiet again. A radio played low, tinny rock music from another decade. Marcus Bennett sat on a plastic chair near the wall, keys resting in his palm, eyes fixed on his car through the open bay door. It was a silver Toyota Camry, 10 years old, clean, well-maintained. Marcus was black, late 30s, an accountant by trade, the kind of man who scheduled oil changes early and kept every receipt in a folder in his glove compartment. He didn't like surprises, especially expensive ones. That was why he was here. The check engine light had come on 2 days ago. No noise, no shaking, just the light. So he'd brought it in. Behind the counter stood Rick Dawson, the mechanic. White, mid-50s, grease permanently embedded in the lines of his hands. He leaned on the counter with the casual confidence of someone who believed he could spot a problem just by looking at a person. Rick hadn't asked many questions. He hadn't needed to, apparently. "Well," Rick said now, wiping his hands on a rag. "I took a look." Marcus straightened slightly. "Okay, what did you find?" Rick tilted his head, lips pressed together in a way that suggested sympathy without effort. "Your fuel control module's shot." Marcus blinked. "The what?" "Fuel control module," Rick repeated. "Common issue on these. Happens all the time." Marcus nodded slowly. "Is that serious?" Rick gave a short laugh. "If you don't want to be stranded on the side of the road, yeah." "How much?" Marcus asked. Rick glanced down at the clipboard, though Marcus noticed he didn't actually read anything. "Part and labor? About 1100. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 1100? He repeated. "For a check engine light?" Rick shrugged. "That's cars for you." Marcus exhaled, trying to stay calm. "Can I see the part?" Rick looked up at him, surprised. "The part?" he echoed. "Yes," Marcus said evenly. "The broken one." Rick hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then he waved a hand dismissively. "It's buried pretty deep. Not something you'd recognize anyway." "I still want to see it," Marcus said. Rick's expression shifted. Not angry, not annoyed, dismissive. "Look," Rick said, lowering his voice as if explaining something obvious. "I've been doing this for 30 years. You came in because something was wrong. I'm telling you what it is." Marcus met his eyes. "And I'm asking to see it." Another pause. Rick sighed loudly, like the request itself was unreasonable. "We already pulled it." Marcus's brow furrowed. "Already?" "Yeah," Rick said quickly. "Had to test it." Marcus glanced through the bay door again. His car was still on the ground. Hood closed. No tools near it. No sign of anything being pulled. "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "Then where is it?" Rick's jaw tightened. "In the back." "Can you bring it out?" Rick leaned back against the counter now, crossing his arms. "Why don't you just trust me?" The question hung there. Marcus had heard it before, in different places, different tones, always the same meaning. "I do trust professionals," Marcus said. "I just also like transparency." Rick snorted. "You think I'm trying to rip you off?" "I didn't say that," Marcus replied. "I said I want to see the part." Rick shook his head, a tight smile pulling at one corner of his mouth. "Man, you wouldn't know what you're looking at." The words landed heavier than they should have. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. Not anger, exactly. Something more familiar, more tired. "Bring it out," he said quietly. Rick stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the back of the garage without another word. Marcus stayed where he was, keys still in his hand, listening to the sounds of the shop. Metal, footsteps, the radio. Minutes passed. Rick didn't come back. Instead, another mechanic walked by, younger, glanced at Marcus, then at his car, confused. Marcus stood up. He walked slowly toward the open bay. And that was when he noticed something that made his pulse quicken. The bolts on the fuel control housing, visible if you knew where to look, were untouched. No tool marks, no fresh scratches, no sign anyone had been there at all. Marcus stopped. Because if the part was definitely broken, why hadn't anyone touched it? Marcus stood there longer than he meant to, staring at the untouched bolts as if they might suddenly rearrange themselves and prove him wrong. They didn't. He crouched slightly, angling his head, making sure the light hit the metal just right. The edges were clean. The dust around the housing was undisturbed. Anyone who had ever worked on a car, even at the most basic level, would know tools leave marks. Time leaves marks. This had none. Slowly, Marcus straightened. He didn't storm back to the counter. He didn't raise his voice. He walked, measured, calm, back to the waiting area and sat down again, keys still warm in his hand. He waited. A few minutes later, Rick Dawson emerged from the back, empty-handed. Couldn't find it, Rick said casually, as if he were talking about a misplaced pen. Must have already been tossed. Marcus looked up. Tossed? Yeah, Rick said. Old parts get thrown out all the time. Marcus nodded once. So you tested it, confirmed it was broken, removed it, and threw it away before I approved the repair? Rick's jaw clenched. That's standard procedure. It's not, Marcus replied quietly. Rick's eyes narrowed. You a mechanic now? No, Marcus said. But I know when something's been worked on, and when it hasn't. Rick scoffed. You accusing me of lying? Marcus stood this time, slow and deliberate. I'm saying the bolts on my fuel control module haven't been touched. For the first time since Marcus had walked in, Rick didn't have an immediate response. That doesn't mean anything, Rick said finally. Some tests don't require full removal. Then why tell me you pulled it? Marcus asked. Rick opened his mouth, closed it. The radio crackled behind him, filling the silence with an awkward guitar riff. Another customer at the counter shifted uncomfortably. The younger mechanic Marcus had seen earlier, Evan, judging by the name stitched on his shirt, paused near a toolbox, listening. Rick rubbed his forehead. Look, man, you came in with a problem. I gave you the solution. Marcus nodded. And I'm asking for proof. Rick's voice hardened. This isn't a courtroom. No, Marcus agreed. It's a business. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Can we put my car back on the lift? I'd like to take a look at it with you. Rick laughed, sharp and humorless. Absolutely not. That was the moment things shifted. Why not? Marcus asked. Because I don't have time for this, Rick snapped. If you don't want the repair, take it somewhere else. Marcus studied him for a long second. I might, but before I do, I want my diagnostic report. Rick waved a hand. Already told you what's wrong. I want it in writing. Rick's face flushed. You think I'm making this up? Marcus didn't answer right away. He glanced around the garage, the other cars on lifts, the grease-stained floor, the younger mechanic still pretending not to listen. I think, Marcus said slowly, that you saw a customer you didn't expect to question you. Rick stepped closer now, lowering his voice. You're out of line. Marcus met his gaze without flinching. So are you. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. Not angry, exposed. Evan cleared his throat from across the garage. Rick? Rick shot him a look. What? Evan hesitated. That Camry? I haven't seen anyone work on it yet. Rick didn't turn around. I handled it. Evan shifted his weight. I was on Bay 3 all morning. Marcus felt something settle into place. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just clarity. Then there should be no problem, Marcus said, putting it on the lift and showing me. Rick's lips pressed into a thin line. No, he said again. There won't. Because now refusing said more than any explanation could. And the untouched bolts weren't just a detail anymore. They were evidence. Rick Dawson stood his ground, arms crossed, jaw tight, as if sheer stubbornness might bend reality back into his favour. The garage felt smaller now, the air heavier. Even the radio seemed quieter, as though it had learned to mind its volume. Marcus Bennett didn't rush the moment. He looked past Rick, letting his eyes move slowly across the shop. The other customers had gone quiet. One man pretended to scroll his phone but hadn't moved his thumb in several seconds. A woman near the door watched openly now, keys dangling from her fingers. Marcus turned back to Rick. "You said the part was broken." "It is," Rick snapped. "You said you removed it." "I did." "You said it was thrown out." "That's right," Marcus nodded. "Then you shouldn't mind me documenting what I'm seeing." Rick's eyes flicked to the phone still in Marcus's hand. "You can't record in here," Rick said quickly. "I'm not recording you," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm photographing my own vehicle." Rick stepped forward. "Put the phone away." That was when Evan spoke again, louder this time. "Rick, maybe we should just—" "Stay out of it," Rick barked. Evan froze. His face reddened, not with anger, but discomfort. He glanced at Marcus, then back at the Camry, then down at the floor. Marcus raised his phone and took a single photo of the untouched bolts. The click sounded louder than it should have. Rick's face darkened. "You trying to threaten me?" "I'm protecting myself," Marcus said. "Big difference." Rick laughed, but it came out strained. "You people always think someone's out to get you." The words landed hard. The garage went completely silent. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. Not surprise, not even anger, just confirmation. "I didn't say that," Marcus replied evenly. "You did." Rick scoffed, but his eyes betrayed him now. He was losing control of the story. Marcus continued, voice steady. "I came in for a diagnostic. You gave me a quote without proof. You told me a part was broken that hasn't been touched, and when I asked reasonable questions, you got defensive." Rick leaned in close. "You calling me racist now?" Marcus held his gaze. "I'm calling you dishonest." That was worse. Rick straightened abruptly. "Get your car and go." "I will," Marcus said. "After you close out the ticket as no repair performed." Rick laughed again. "You're not getting that." Marcus nodded. "Then I'll let my insurance company, the state licensing board, and the shop owner sort it out." Rick's confidence cracked, just slightly. "You don't even know who owns this place," Rick said. Marcus tapped his phone screen once. "I do." He turned the phone so Rick could see the name on the business listing, the owner's name, the email address, the complaint form already open. Evans swallowed hard. "Rick," he said quietly, "the owner said last month we have to log every diagnostic now, especially if a customer asks." Rick shot him a look of pure fury, but it was too late. Marcus slid his keys onto the counter. "I'll wait." The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 1 second, then another. Rick stared at the keys like they were an accusation. Finally, with a sharp exhale, he grabbed the clipboard and began writing. "Fine," he muttered. "No repair performed." Marcus watched carefully as Rick filled out the form. When he was done, Marcus took the paper, read it slowly, and folded it neatly. "Thank you," he said. Rick didn't respond. Marcus walked back to his car, started the engine, and felt the familiar hum beneath him. The check engine light was still on. But now, at least, he knew the truth. As he pulled out of the garage, Evan watched him go, something unsettled in his expression. Rick stood alone at the counter, staring at the empty bay, because the old part hadn't been broken. And the story he'd told couldn't survive being questioned. Marcus didn't drive far before pulling into a quiet parking lot and turning the engine off. He sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting his heartbeat settle. The confrontation replayed in his mind, not the sharp words, but the pauses, the moments where the truth had forced its way into the open simply by being examined. He exhaled slowly. The check engine light still glowed on the dashboard, steady, unchanged, but now it felt less threatening. Later that afternoon, Marcus stopped at a smaller repair shop across town. It didn't have bright signage or a waiting room with stale coffee, just 2 open bays, a handwritten price board, and a mechanic who looked up from under a lifted car and said, "Hey, what can I help you with?" Marcus explained the issue. No drama, no accusations. The mechanic, Luis, mid-30s, plugged in a diagnostic scanner and let it run while Marcus watched. "Fuel control module's fine," Luis said after a minute. "You've got a loose sensor. Happens. I can tighten it and reset the system." "How much?" Marcus asked. Luis shrugged. $50. Marcus felt a short, surprised laugh escape him. "That's it?" Luis smiled. "That's it." 20 minutes later, the light was gone. Luis handed Marcus the old sensor gasket he'd replaced. Cracked, worn, unmistakably used. "Keep it if you want," he said. "Proof's always good." Marcus took it. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the gasket and paperwork spread out in front of him. He typed carefully, choosing his words the same way he always did, with precision. He filed a complaint, attached the photo of the untouched bolts, included the written "No repair performed" ticket, added the second shop's diagnostic report. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't editorialize. He just documented. Before hitting submit, he paused. He thought about Rick Dawson's certainty, the way questions had been treated like insults, the way transparency had been framed as mistrust. Then he clicked send. 2 weeks later, Marcus received an email. The shop owner thanked him for bringing the issue to their attention. An internal review had been conducted, policies were being reinforced, staff retraining was underway. Rick Dawson's name wasn't mentioned. It didn't need to be. Marcus closed the email and leaned back in his chair. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory, just relief. Relief that he'd trusted his instincts, relief that he hadn't backed down, relief that the truth hadn't required shouting, only patience. The next time Marcus needed an oil change, he went back to Luis's shop. He waited in a folding chair, scrolling his phone, listening to the ordinary sounds of honest work being done. When it was finished, Luis wiped his hands and said, "All set." Marcus smiled. "I appreciate you explaining things." Luis nodded. "Always." As Marcus drove away, the car felt the same as it always had. Smooth. Reliable. Familiar. But he felt different. Because sometimes the most important repair isn't the one under the hood. It's the moment you realize you don't have to accept a story just because someone says it with confidence. You can ask, you can check, you can insist on being shown the truth. And when you do, even untouched bolts can speak for themselves.